talk about it. I'll talk about it with you. All right, we're back. We are COMP305. That is Game Programming 1 at Centennial. It's the fall 2017 semester, and we are week 9 in my books. Part 1, this should say part 1. We're talking about Unity 2D animations in more depth. Last week we talked about explosions. This week, and that's without using really the animation system, so to speak. It was just like one clip in the animation finite state machine. This week we're going to do something like that, but we're going to make a different kind of animation. We're going to use sprite sheet animations. What I want to do is I want to create a project that allows us to move from one state, one kind of animation to another. Now this is kind of in line with the next section we're going to get into, which is platformers, how to make a 2D platformer. That's a very common 2D game type. Some of you may be doing something like that. Some people, most of you won't, but it's good to know how to do this kind of stuff with Unity. So that's what we're going to be talking about it. Now, platformers present a different issue when it comes to making a game. So normally I'll be using this other COMP305 mail pilot demo to go forward. Today I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to leave this behind, but we're going to get back to this later on when it comes to adding other things. So I'm going to get new. I want to make a new project called, again, COMP305 Fall 2017. And it's going to be the platformer demo that I'm going to start off, right? Very, very slow. It's going to be a 2D project. I'm not going to use Unity Analytics for us because we're just, for our purposes, it doesn't make sense. I'm going to click on Create Project, right? And that's our little stuff I put together. Let's just go back to here. And what I want to do is, with this one, as soon as our Unity starts off, is I want to talk about building assets, 2D assets that we can use. Now, there's some great tools out there, too, that I'm going to be talking about today. And I will continue this Friday. So, again, there won't be a class next Saturday officially. It'll be more of a workshop. But I will be talking about a new 2D tool set called Anima 2D. Right, which allows us to use bones inside of our animation, right? Almost creating a rig for your animation. So I'm probably going to be talking about that again next Friday, right? So Saturday the 9th, again, I have a conflict. I won't be here physically, but I will be producing your class, all the stuff for your class on the 8th, right? And then we'll have our official in-class tests, in-class assignment on the 16th, the day after Star Wars. So I'm just putting that out there for people who are not here today. Okay, one thing to note before we start off, just a note about the test. If you're not here, you can't get marked on it. You need to be here physically. It's kind of going to take the place of a midterm this semester. It's probably going to be worth 15 to 20%, just letting you know. I'm still working out the details. But so it's going to be probably like worth twice as much as maybe one of the things you've already handed in so far. And it's going to cover everything that we've talked about up until today, right? So anything we talk about today is fair game. I'm going to ask you to build something with these components. That's what I was going to say. So like, let's say, for example, we've talked about how to make a 2D game in Unity. All the stuff we've talked about how to make that game is going to be fair game for me to, no pun intended, for me to ask you to make that. So I may ask you to do something like, there must be a scrolling background. I may ask you to do that. I may ask you to make, to use controls, different kinds of controls, right? Now we've talked about different ways of controlling your player. So there might be some, some funky control. I may ask you not to use your mouse, to use your keyboard controls as an example instead, right? Those kinds of things. So stay tuned. It won't be that crazy, the test, but it'll be something where you and your group will get together to create as polished a game as possible, right, in the 4 hours that we have together. So it's a 4-hour kind of workshop, and at the end of the day, then you get some really cool marks for it. You can talk during it, all that kind of stuff. You can look on the internet. It's not like a closed book test or anything like that. You really can't come and go, though. You have to work for that 4 hours. You might be able to take breaks, but you can't leave the school and stop. It's like an exam, right? and then almost like a little game jam for 4 hours, right? You do your thing, and at the end, in the same day, you present what you have, right? So it'll be like a presentation. It's all the things we've talked about. Presentation, putting up a PowerPoint, talking about your game. It's got to be unique. There'll be some stuff that we'll put together. Nothing too crazy with the restrictions you've been given, right? And it's a great way to learn. Okay, but more on that next week when I broadcast. I will give you more details on that stuff as we go forward. One thing that I wanted to share with you again was my setup. Again, I'm using this 2x3 setup here in Unity. We talked about that last week briefly. I created this preferred setup, right? Everyone has different ways of doing that. But the first thing I do, again, when I set up a project, what are the first things I do? Winston? I got to ask somebody. I'm setting up a new project in Unity. What would you do if you're setting up a brand new project in Unity? First thing. Folders. I want to set up all my folders, right? Because organizing yourself is really important. When you do anything from Unreal, if you're using Unreal, or if you're making a project for the web or anything else, we always set up our folder structure, because these tools don't have a folder structure, a preferred folder structure for you. You have to set it up yourself. All right. So we use the game engine, but we have to kind of create the game. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to create some folders here. I'm going to make a new folder that I'm going to call scripts with an underscore, just to keep it at the top. There's going to be another one called scenes, right? This is my preferred way, and I've learned it from other people, but this is what I recommend: scenes, scripts. And then, of course, we're going to have some kind of textures or sprites, right? There might be some sprites. We might have some sprite sheets. Actually, I don't put an underscore. Let me just rename that. I'll be okay. Yeah, sprites. So sprites, we're going to have some sprite sheets, maybe a sprite sheet or two. So I'll say sprite sheet. Animations. Again, all the regular stuff that we set up before, right? So, but I'm just putting it together for the first time. So you see it all in its incomplete glory. And then normally for doing 3D, we'd have models. We don't have any models right now, but we're going to have, that's what sprites are. But we're going to have prefabs, because there's going to be some prefabs we're going to set up as well. Those kinds of things. So that's pretty much the main, the most of what we want to kind of put together. Right, for our little scene, right? Our scene right now is empty, and we have this stuff, but we need some assets. And if I'm not wrong, up online, I may have some assets that I can download for you guys, or I can make available to you. Let's go to our GitHub, and we're going to go to Centennial. I should have, if I actually search my, if I go platformer, there is this thing called platformer assets, which I'm going to download. So if you look up online, there is under Centennial College, right, our little organization, there's something called platformer assets. For this assignment, or this little thing that we're going to be using, just grab these from up online. So I'm going to kind of download them myself to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to download the zip. And for those people who are really lazy, I'll just put it up on Slack too. What the heck? You can get it from either way. So here it is, downloads. Okay, here's my platformer assets. I'm going to extract them to a folder. If I can get to them. Did I not extract them already? Where did they go? Yeah, it's already there. I just can't see it. It's probably up here somewhere. There we go. Okay, so yeah. And I got sounds and sprites. Great. So I'm going to grab this assets folder. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to go into my desktop for a second and paste it up here. I will make another little zip file just so that stuff is included. It's going to be called assets.zip. And then we'll go into Slack for those people, again, who are who don't want to grab from GitHub for whatever reason, or don't have access to, or watching this later on. I don't know. But we're going to go into that proper organization. And then I'll just drag in those assets, that assets folder, which is platformer assets. All right, so that should be up on Slack for those people who want it and who are following along. Okay, so then now for me, I have a new project that I'm working on. My little project that is where my Unity sets up. Okay, so if I look at Unity, one thing I want to do is, I haven't set anything up here, but I have my primary scene, and I want to save it, right? So I'm going to say File, Save Scene for a second. Now notice where it's going to take me to the folder. That's what I wanted to do this for. Actually, let me just see the address. So it is under, I don't know why it's there, but that's totally fine. It's gone to a different folder under graphic design 2 for some reason or another. Yeah, that's not where it's supposed to be. But anyways, whatever. We'll move it somewhere else later on. The great thing is you can just drag and drop it in. So if I go to my desktop and I see my assets in here, right? Here are my assets. I have, again, both sounds and sprites. That's one thing I forgot to put in here. So here's my sounds. So just drag and drop that in. Sprites I already have. I already have a folder called sprites. So I'll just grab all my sprites from in here. And you can see that I have a coin, a hero, an enemy, and some tiles. So kind of to set up our little example scene. And I'll just grab those things and put them in there. And when you drag your sprites in, they'll be converted so that Unity can use them, right? All right, so what is it that I got? How do I, when I look at my my sprites, what I have my hero sprite. Here's my hero sprite. And I have this little guy, right? He looks like this. Again, now there's a reason why I've got him and why he looks like this. And some people are like, why don't you use something that's more proportional? Why I made it like this on purpose. I want to get a guy who's not proportional. Like, notice he's got a big head. And I'm going to drag him in here for a second. I'll drag him into the hierarchy, right? And if I focus in on him, there he is. So I notice that my little sprite for the hero, he's got a big head and a small body. Now, I want to create a collider for him, right? What are the challenges that I'm going to have from a collider perspective, creating a collider? Anyone have an idea? You guys are all Saturday mornings this morning, right? Well, I'm going to have I have a problem, right? Because if I put a collider just on his body like this, like in a square, let's just do that. So notice I just have a sprite renderer. That's all I have here. That's the component. So one of the things that Unity does is it uses this idea of an entity component system, right? Where you add components to your object, your game object. And one of the components we have, there's two here. One of them is a transform, which is part of every game object. We talked about that. And then the sprite renderer, which is part of some game objects. Anything that's going to render or draw to the screen Here we have a sprite renderer, a special type of renderer. And notice that the first sprite that we're using, just for this example first, is this idle 0001 animation, right? Here he is, right? Here's my idle. But I don't have any kind of physics attached. I'm going to go to physics 2D, right? And notice I have this idea of a box collider. Let's add a box collider for him, just to show you this. All right, so here's my box collider, and a collider is just the ability for us to, create a collision detection system for our little character, right? Yay, and if I edit the collider, you can see that he's a big box. Now, what's the problem? I have this big empty area right here, right? So if something collides with him in here, it's going to look weird. In fact, if I stand on a platform, I can stand on a platform so that the platform's over here. Let me show you that. So if I add a new, we'll just add there's some 3D objects we can add, but I'm going to add a 2D object here. I'm going to add a cube, a 3D object. Here's my cube. And let's suppose this is his platform for a second, right? So just to show you this around, so I'm going to move the stuff around. But his platform is here. And if I realign my cube, so let's say here's his platform, right? Is he on the platform? No. What about his collider? Yes. So that means he's like hovering in midair on the platform. So normally you look at him, you're like, holy crap, he's off the platform, he should fall. But he's not going to fall because his collider's this thing. So if I don't do that, if I make his collider really small, let's say, for example, oops, if I go back to his collider, so here's his box collider, and if I kind of do one of these with his collider and make it so it's like this, then you've got this part of his head that sticks out, right? So this presents a new challenge, right? So here, I'll just go here. Did I put them on there? Oh, yeah, I made the cube as part of them. I'll pull the cube out. Yeah, so if I kind of move this guy now where he's supposed to be like this is okay. If in this kind of scenario, right? So I've got this scenario here where he's kind of here. But what about now, right? Just curious, if I have another cube, let's just down another cube here that we're going to have for our other part of the platform. And this cube is going to look like this. He's climbing up a wall as an example, and he falls. Let's just say the cube is like this, right? And here he is, and he just falls like this, right? Well, he's here, and he falls down to the cube like this, right? That's what's going to happen. So that's kind of weird, too, because his collider is right here, so he can actually physically go into the cube, into the wall. And that means this is bad, right? Because that's a problem. So there's a couple of options. I could use some kind of mesh collider, right? Remember, we have different kinds of collider options. So a cube collider may not be the right option. I'm just putting it out there for you guys, right? Cube collider may not be the right thing, but I may want to use some kind of collider, different kind of collider for his head. So let's just kill this one. So I'm going to say remove component. And let's add another one. Let's see what other kind of components we can add. We talked about this. I could use an edge collider, a circle collider, and so on. Or a polygon collider. This is the most expensive type, like we talked about, because what it does is it tries to make a very accurate, Unity tries to figure out the shape of our dude over here, right? Again, I can kind of add another edge, another vertice, right? A vertex. And I can do the same thing for here. I can kind of add some more detail if I really want to get accurate collisions. But tell me, do I really care? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, all I care about is that his head is flat, because if an enemy jumps on his head, as an example, or something like that, or a block falls on his head, I mean, it should kind of either stick there, or I should be able to detect that. This is cool, this idea. It looks nice, but the problem is it becomes a very expensive collider to use. Now, good things. Here's the good news. I only have one of these guys, right? If I'm playing a multiplayer game, even, I'm only probably going to have maybe 4 players or something. So maybe 4 players that I have an expensive collision system for, if they're like this, right? On the downside, if this is the problem, if I'm just going to use like the most expensive tool set to solve my problem, and I have some kind of crazy other sprites for enemies, like sprites that are shaped like this too, right? That might also present a problem. Okay, so definitely one option to do this, to kind of create a thing like this. So now here's the other problem. What if he falls down, he's on a platform and he falls, and boom, he lands on his head like this. he can kind of hang there from his face, right? Which is kind of a weird thing. I'm just putting it out there. Like, this is just like, you know, situations, right? Is that possible? Absolutely. So that's a problem too, right? I'm going to put it out there. So yeah, collider, perfect, wraps around him. He'll detect collisions. But it's almost like we need another way of detecting whether this character is on the ground. Platformer, one of the key points about a platformer is you're going to jump or move from one platform to the other, right? So we need to have a way of detecting whether this character is grounded. Okay, how do we detect he's grounded? And there's ways of doing that. For example, I could have a collider. I do have a collider on these boxes right now, right? Now, they're 3D colliders. I just put them in here just as placeholder assets for us, right? But you know, as this character, if he's on the platform, he's hanging out here as an example, right? You know, I'm colliding with my 3D box, right? I could do that, and that it'll stop me from moving. But what about this one? Should I put a collider up on this one? This the way it is right now, or what if there's a situation? I'm just putting the situations together where you don't have this situation. This is a proper collider. He's been walking on it. I mean, a proper platform. And then he falls, and he's here like this. That could happen too. He could be stuck, right? So that's an issue. That's an issue. It's almost like we want to turn off his collider, right? So here's his collider. When he's in the air, as soon as he's in the air, I want to turn off his collider until he becomes grounded, quote unquote. And he won't be grounded with his head like this, okay? It's almost like I want him to pass through in this case, right? Or at least if he collides with his head, I want him to kind of be knocked off somehow, and like, you know, he can't hang from his head. I don't want him allowed to hang out from his head. That doesn't make any sense. All right, so interesting character choices, right? Could I have chosen another character? Absolutely. But this is the stuff we're gonna have to deal with when we do platformers. Now that's looking ahead. We're not making a whole platformer today. We're just talking about some character animation. All right, so let's just get rid of these. Just some discussions, you know, in terms of design, right? I've got my character, and I want to get rid of him. I'm just talking about this from why I chose him. So I've got all these animations, and notice that on the right I have a lot of them. I have 24 animations for his for the character's idle. 24. That means there's 24 keyframes that we're using to show character idleness. Right, it's kind of a long way. Also, notice that I'm not using a sprite sheet here, but I have a hero sheet right here. Right here's my hero sheet, and this comes from our lovely guys from our texture packer, right? Which I want to move around. Now, I can't see it, and the reason why is because I haven't included the plugin for texture packer. So again, for those people who haven't seen it before and who are kind of jumped in now from the video for whatever reason, I want to look at the asset store, right? And there's a free download from the asset store if you have texture packer. And if I look at texture packer, if I can search for that, there is a texture packer importer, which is what I want to use. This is right here, right? Texture packer importer. And texture packer importer allows me to add, I change my editor so I can use texture packer to import stuff from, or use texture packer for sprites. I'm going to download this one. And once it's downloaded, it's going to ask me if I want to include it, right? As an example, which I do. I want to include this thing in here. So import. And this will change the way my editor sees. Make sure that this folder or still exists. Reconfigure OneDrive. That is really bizarre. That was not expected at all. I didn't expect that error. Lovely times we have when this stuff happens, right? Yeah, so I'm not sure if I got that whole thing in. Wow. Hopefully you'll have better, you know, I mean, just for now, just because that was a weird thing, and I'm on OneDrive for whatever reason. I'm just going to close my project down and save my scene. Desktop. which that was really weird. Okay, so yeah, I'm using OneDrive for backup, but this time it's just kind of bit me nicely. So just want to move this one from here to here. Yay. Let's try that again. So I'm just going to open up my Unity. That was really weird. Let's open up that Unity thing again. Okay, so open, go to my desktop. Worst case, we'll just do all that again, but I would not prefer that. There it is. All right, so it's going to open up. And what I want to do is, like I said, I want to take some of those textures now, all the sprites, into my texture packer. And I want to build up my sprite sheet. It's a good practice because, again, it kind of lowers the draw calls in terms of like, oh, sorry, the file access, not draw calls. So draw calls will be the same. File access from, from the, as we load things in. So normally, like I said, I have my sprites, and inside my sprites, I was looking at my hero. My hero sprite has this sprite sheet, and what I want to do is I just want to make sure that that's good. I want to go back to the store for a second, the asset store, and just look for texture packer one more time. I just want to make sure that when I download it, it works, because last time I had a problem with my access. That's the problem. Here it is. It's called texture packer importer, and if I'm not wrong, I want to import, and I want to kind of select it all. And it looks like it already has those. So the example project came through, the sprite sheet came through, and so that's all there. I want to import that stuff again, make sure that it's good. Good. So this should change up the way we see sprite sheets when we make them. And right now I have a bunch of these idle animations and so on. And I want to kick off texture packer. All right, so here's my my assets, and here's my file now. And texture packer, like I talked about before, I think it's great software to own if you're going to do 2D games, right? You can target it for different platforms. I want to make it so it's for Unity right now. And what you can do with it is you can drag and drop your assets. So if I go to my assets folder, this is in Unity now. I'm looking at my sprites. I'm going to my hero sprite. And I'm going to kind of pick all the sprites that I want. So I'm going to kind of make all these ones, these idle animations. And I know that there's 24 of them, like we said. I just want to pick the meta files right now. I guess I could filter this list, but it's the same as if I picked them. So there's like all these 24. And do I need 24 animations for an idle? Probably not. This particular sprite set has an idle animation that's 24 frames. So boom, I drag and drop them in. There they are. Okay, so this is the idle animation from here to here. Okay. Now I know I'm going to have other animations in here, and there's also a jump animation that I'm going to kind of add in there. So here's my jump animation, which right now is about 6 frames. So there's 6 frames for jump. And there's also walk. Here's my walking animation. I don't think I have a dying animation. Some of them do. But I think he has other ones. So his walk animation seems to be about, or about 15 frames. So those are the 3 animations that I've got here. All right, so good. So I've got all the animations. This is my hero sprite sheet. And if you notice, they're put in different places. Let's make this a little bigger for you guys so you can see it. The great thing is you can test this right in Texture Packer, like I mentioned last time. If I want to see what his idle looks like, I can select all the sprites for his idle animation and actually do an animation preview of what the idle will look like, right? So here he is. He's idling. I can make that a little faster so that he's idling here, right? There he is. So you can see how his head is going down. It's kind of hard to see because it's small on the screen, but he's actually moving here. We'll see more of this when we bring him into Unity. So it looks like it's working. Remember in when we create a sprite sheet, what we want to try and do is we can change the settings of Texture Packer so it aligns everything in kind of name order if we want to, and that is in advanced settings. So if people are following along again, I'll go to Texture Packer. One thing we haven't talked about is the data file or the texture path, right? And we want to kind of align those early on. So I want to kind of go into my place that I want to go into, which is going to be under desktop. This is where my files are. Under my platformer demo, I want to go into my assets. And this time I want to put it into sprite sheets. So this is where it's going to go, right? And I'm going to make the data file. It's going to be of type TP sheet, right? I'm going to call this platformer. And also the texture path, I want that to be the same as well. So there's my texture path file. So I'm going to kind of go in there, and it's going to be, I love this. I'm going to go back into this, and assets, sprite sheets. This is where it's going to live. And I'm going to call this platformer. This is all the stuff for it's my hero, actually, is what it is. Maybe I should call it that instead. Hero. So it's my hero sprite sheet, right? And yeah, I'll probably rename this thing to hero as well. Sprite sheet, hero. Save. Okay. So yeah, those two things are required. Notice that my maximum sheet size, so the extra texture, the image is 2048 by 2048 pixels, right? That's the resolution that I'm choosing. I can make a larger sheet if I want. The bigger the sheet, obviously, the longer it will take to load in a real game. Size constraints, it's power of 2. I talked about that last time, where it's good to use a power of 2 in terms of making a sprite sheet. The computers like it better when you read it in. I can also force square it, which means it's going to be 2048. If it was some other thing, I could do that too. Other options, it says max rex, heuristics best, packed best. If I want a multi-pack, I can do that. My trim mode is polygon outline. I could put none if I don't want to, right? There's none. Trim margin, this just gives me a margin between my sprites, so I can add in some pixels between them. That's what's going to happen here. If I had some kind of outline, I don't have an outline right now, but if I want to, I could. So if I go back to polygon outline, and if I increase this trim, it'll just increase the size of the distance between my sprites. And this is easier, so that way whenever you have to go through here, you can go back and do that. That's what the trim margin does. So put that down to 1 or 2. And then there's also the padding. I could put a border padding on, let's say for about 1 or 2 pixels. It's good. It's good practice, so that way you can see the actual pixels separated, right? It's better for Unity when you do this too, right? Shape padding, I could do that too. I could put a shape padding in there. I'm not going to do that though. It adds more size to my sheet, right? So that's what I've kind of done here right now. This is my sheet. So algorithm is max rex. That's what it does, maximum rex. There's also the basic algorithm, which is the way it saves everything, right? Sort order, I can put it ascending in basic. If I go back to max rex, it's gone. If I go to polygon, that's a little different too. It makes a different kind of sprite sheet. I want to use basic. Right, so basic allows me to sort from ascending or descending names. I want it ascending, so it's in file order, whatever it is, right? Okay, cool. So I've kind of done a few things here. I can also change the scale of my sprite sheet if I want to make my objects bigger. Okay. Okay, great. So I've got my stuff. I'm ready to do things. I'm going to go over here to where it says publish sprite sheet, and it should go in the right places. Press OK. Then I'm going to save my project. I'm going to save as, and it should save it under. It already should have saved it under assets. Or not under mail pilot demo. I'm going to go to here, platformer demo. It just remembers where I was last. I'm going to go into sprite sheets, and I'm going to save my texture packer specific sheet. I'm going to call it platformer. Actually, hero. That's what it's going to be, hero. All right, so hopefully that won't clash. That's good. And there we go. That's the actual sheet itself, right? It's ready to go. And automatically, if I go back to Unity, you can see that I have this sprite sheets folder with my hero. And if I look in there, you can see now that it's created a proper hierarchy, right, for my hero animation, right, where I have access to each of the things, but I only have one little sheet. So it makes it nice and neat. It's not all my assets are in my sprites, but I'm only going to use the stuff that's inside my sprite sheets folder, right? So it's just from an organizational perspective, it makes it nice. And it's already pre-cut them. So if I have another sprite sheet, let's say I can do the same thing. I can cut them inside Unity, but this one already does everything. Now let's do the idle animation. And remember how we did this last time? I kind of grabbed all these sprites right here from the sprite sheet and dragged and dropped it into the hierarchy like this. Okay, and what that does is it automatically brings up the animation setup. So if I go back to assets and I go back to animations, as an example, I want to put it in animations. I want to call this the hero idle animation. So I'll call this hero idle, right? And I kind of drag and drop that into there. Okay, and there's my idle. And if I play this thing right now, right, to show you, there's nothing on it, so it's going to play. Okay. It's kind of small to see, but yeah, let's make it a little bigger so you can see him. This is what he does right now. He's kind of idles. It's kind of pixelated. We can fix that, right? But you can see that that's what he does. That's the idle animation, right? There's no work here on my part. All I've done is dragged and dropped it from the sprite sheet, right? So sprite sheet is a bunch of frames that make up this animation, right? And all this does is it flips frames, right, in a reasonable amount of time so that you can see this, that he looks like he's idling. So he's just kind of trying to, idling means he's kind of showing this breathing animation, and you see this idea of his body moving around. His pixels actually move too. Notice even on the base on his feet, they move. So be careful about that. If you're on a platformer, he might seem like he's sinking into the platform, depending on where you put him. All right. All right. So that's what he does. Let's move back this scale in terms of 5 times to 1 time. So that's how small he is on our screen right now. Okay. So that's something of a limitation. Just putting it out there. He's pretty small as a character, and that'll be the actual size that we see him, because this is like our scale. Right? But for us, we have him on our screen, and we're not going to use this guy. I mean, by default, he is definitely one of the characters we're going to use, or one of the versions, but we need the other ones too. So remember, we're only doing animations today. So here's our hero idle animation. That's the clip. Whenever you see a symbol like this, I'll make it bigger so you guys can see it. You see this symbol in Unity, it means clip. If you see this symbol in Unity, it means animator, right? And this is the container for all the clips. If I double click on the animator, you're going to see that the hero idle animation is the first one inside this animator. Now, I don't want to call this the idle animator. That doesn't make any sense. I want to call it the hero animator. So we just rename it. And Unity will adjust. Right? Yeah.
Or when it's running, just go to the animator.
So the clip's already made. Once I dragged and dropped everything in there, the clip was made, right? That was when I dragged and dropped all those sprites onto as a prefab. It made the clip for me, right? When I did that, I just did all those animations, compacted them into one animation, right, and put them inside the animator. The animator is the system, this thing here that you're looking at right now, and the clips are a bunch of frames. And all it's done is put all the frames together into a clip, one clip. And Unity did that for me, right? It won't update the clips because the clips are made, right? But it'll update which clip we're playing, right? That's what the animator does. The animator controls which clip is being played at the same time, right? So right now we have as we start this this object, this idle is what we called it, right? Now this is idle, and this is going to be our hero. So I'm going to rename this thing to hero, right? And this is our player. I'm just going to tag this as a player, our player animation, right? So this is our player. And here's the hero idle. Here's the hero animator. You can see that the hero animator is now being used as the main controller, right? Right now, the hero does not have any kind of collider. That's why he's not, doing anything. I'm just using this for demonstration purposes, We're going to use this platformer demo later on. Okay, so I'm going to save this thing, right? Save the scene. Let's do the other ones. So I'm going to go into the sprite sheet, right? I'm going to kind of reduce this a little bit. I've got my idle, and I want to grab my jump. So grab my jump animation, 6 frames, and drag that in. And we're going to call this in the same, and under sprite sheets, we're going to call this hero jump. Okay, hero jump. But it's separate from, it's another animator it made, and I don't want that, right? So if I looked at my sprite sheets, here's hero jump. I want to take these two things and put them into animations where they should have gone. Here they are. I also have my hero idle right now. Here's my hero animator. And I want to add my hero jump. So I'm going to drag my clip from my from inside this folder and just drag and drop it in. And now I have hero idle and hero jump. These are the 2 clips, but only one animator. And I'm going to delete the other one. This one I don't need. This one just got made automatically by Unity. Okay, so I only need one animator, just this one. This is my finite state machine. All right, so guys, question, if you guys are paying attention, right? If I want to move, should a hero be able to move from idling to jumping right away? Is that possible in a platform? What do you think? Opinions. I'm not telling you there's no right or wrong here. It's just your game. Idling to jumping. So I'm idling and then I want to jump. Should I be able to do that with a hero? I think so, right? So that means that in my hero idle, I want to right click here and I want to make a transition that goes from hero idle to hero jumping. That's what it does. And I can move now from my entry point, my hero idle, to my hero jumping. How about this? Can I move from hero jumping back to hero idle? Is that possible? Yeah, right? So I'm going to make another transition from hero jumping to hero idle. There we go. So I got those 2 transitions. Okay, so that's what this does. All right, let's get the next one. So which is the last one for our example. Okay, so I'm going to go to my sprite sheets, and I'm going to look at my hero. And under my hero, I have this walk cycle. It's a big, long walk cycle, by the way. Here's my big, long walk cycle, and I'm going to drag and drop this in. Notice I have a few objects here. I'm going to get rid of them in a second. I'm going to put this, instead of sprite sheets this time, where I should have put them is in animations. And I'm just going to call this hero jump, right? That's what it's going to be. And save. What did I do? Did I already save it? Oh, hero. No, hero walk is what I want. I'll be all right. Hero walk. There we go. And that creates my hero walk animation. Again, same like last time. If I go to my animations, I have a hero idle, hero jump, and hero walk. I don't care about the walk animator. I'm going to get rid of it. But I do want my hero animator, and I want to put in my hero walk as a clip. All right, cool. So here's I just want you to picture this for yourself. This is almost like a plan of how my hero can run around and stuff like this on the stage. So can I go from an idle state to a walking state? The answer is yes, right? I should be able to walk. There we go. And can I go from a walking state to an idle state? And the answer is, again, I should be able to do that. How about this? A walking state to a jumping state? Yes. Right, I should be able to do that. And from a jumping state back to a walking state, I should be able to do that. So you can see that these are the 3 things that I can do, my hero can do right now. I come in as idle, but I can always transition from here to a walking state, or from here to an idle state, or from walking to a jumping state, or from walking back to an idle state, and so on. Okay. Now, if I had a more complex animation with many different kinds of clips, I could add in a whole transition series in here as well. And there might be some things I can't do. For example, in some animations, maybe I can't fire and walk at the same time, or fire and run. I may stop myself from doing that. I can have, maybe if my hero's carrying a weapon, like a gun, maybe I have to stop and fire, right? So I can't walk and fire, as an example. Or maybe I can walk and fire, but I can't walk and fire and run. I can't fire when I'm running. That doesn't make any sense because of the recoil. I don't know. You guys can set that up as well. So you can decide on some kind of animations I can't get to from a certain state. For now, though, every animation is accessible from every other animation. So that's why we have this little triangle, right? And one of the great thing is that you could see the transitions right here, right? I can also in my animator, right? So these are all the animations, right? Animations are a different thing. And if I want to, I can look at the actual animation. So here's my hero walk. And so there's different windows here, different windows that I'm using. And here's the sprite that I got. Here's my hero walk sprite. And you can see that the animation for hero walk, how many animations I have, right? So I can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But guess what? I'm only using 12 samples, right, of walking. And I should probably change this to 14. The more samples that I use, if I made this like sample 14 samples instead of 12 samples, which matches my animation, it'll just walk on, there's 14 frames. That's what I'm saying here, right? I could change this sample number to something smaller, like 6. And that means it'll run either faster or slower, depending on what you want to do, okay? That's what this does. I can actually see my animations here, right? And this is something called the dope sheet. Again, we talked about this before, right? So what I can do, if I want to preview, my animations. I could do that, right? And you can do that here by pressing play when you're ready to go. I'm not ready to go yet, so I'm not going to do that right now, and I can't. Okay. I can also look at the animation curve, and the curves, when we actually make an animation itself, defines the curve of the actual sprite itself, like the way it moves. And the curves can be also, it can also define the speed graph, how fast it moves. For example, if I wanted to slow down and speed up, I can do that with a speed graph. And we're not going to get into that right now, but we can get into that later. Okay, so this is this animation clip. Notice that when he is walking, he actually moves a little higher up. It's hard to see this, but let's see if I can zoom in on this thing. It's not really doing that what I wanted, but what it's actually doing is, if you can actually see, if you actually look on your sheet, it seems like he walks, his walk is irregular. And for me to show this, okay, so here's his walk, and here's the jump, okay? Let me get rid of these. Here's my hero. My hero by default, when I play him, right, here's in my playing animation, even though I have other animation clips inside his thing, notice how he automatically transitions to jumping. Look, jumps. I haven't done anything. I just put the jump clip in there, and he just goes from idle to jump. Right? The reason why that's happening is because inside of my hero animator, right, I go hero idle, hero jump, and there's nothing to stop him from doing that. He's just going to go into this. This is my first clip, and that's why it decided to go here into hero jump second. Right? It doesn't have to. I could have made it so that there's no hero jump. It was just going to go to hero walk. But it's just showing the different animations in sequence. So when this ends, when hero idle ends, somehow it goes here. Back to the actual the scene for a second. So this is where so the hero jump looks kind of weird. It's okay. It's not so fast, not so slow. But what about this other animation? And I can check these by going back to the animator, stopping this, and instead of making my hero idle the default, let's make my hero walk the default. And I can do that by right-clicking and saying set as default state. So now you can see that it turns orange. Again, this is just for previewing to see what it looks like. So now let's see what my hero walk animation looks like. Right? Okay, so it goes from supposed to do my walk, now it's jumping, right? And then it was jumping for a while, and then it stopped, right? It was walking, I mean, and then it stopped and became jumping again. And the reason why, because it transitions. There's run, idle, jump, right? You can see them all. Yeah, and that's the really weird thing. It doesn't go back. So how do we do that? We don't want this. I'm just showing you what it looks like, right? And I think my run is too slow. It looks like it's too slow for what we want, right? Go back to my hero animator. Here it is. I want it to start at the idle, right? But I only want to transition to jump or to walk when I press the buttons, right? When I press my buttons, it's going to take my input. That's when I want it to go. And I have to set that up. So if I look at my transition line from here, my hero idle to hero jump, I go in, click on the transition, and you can see that there's a bit of a blending happening. So it blends from hero idle into what looks like hero jump. Here's my hero jump. Animation to be really small. I don't want it to be drastic like that, the blend. So I want to reduce that. I also don't want to wait for the idle to finish before I jump, right? I want it to go there immediately. This here has exit time. What it does is it makes it so that as soon as the hero is finishing idling, right, he's going to, like, you know, only then is going to show the jump animation. I don't want that. I want to show the jump animation as soon as I press my space bar, right? Not when it feels like telling me to do it. Same thing on the way back. I don't want there to be an exit time from jumping to idling again. When I land, I want to idle, right? So that's the second thing I got to change. So I got to change this exit time. In fact, all of these should be that. So from idle to walk, from walk to idle, from walk to jumping, and from jumping to walking, right? Jumping to walking, again, I want to make that a smaller transition. Walking to jumping, I also make that a smaller transition. I'm just making the sizes different, so that way they're not that not much blending going on there. You can look at that in terms of your animation style as well. I'm reducing the amount of blending that's going on between states. That's all I'm doing. I'm just preparing that. Well, that's got to be changed too. And now that I've got the blending at the right level, right, I can also look at individual clips. If I look at this clip, you can see that what the speed of the clip is for hero jump. It's a 1-to-1. We talked about that last time, where this speed number is a normalized figure, where 1 is 100% based on the number of frames, right? If I put this to 2, it'll be twice as fast, right? If I put it to 0.5, it'll be half as fast, right? You can see that there are transitions. It talks about all the transitions here, which is really, really good, right? Okay. And what about this? If I go to my hero walk looks pretty slow, and I'm probably going to modify this later on so we can see what it's going to look like, right? So it's going to be a little faster than what it looks like right now. All right. Okay, so my hero idle, here's my hero idle. If I click on my hero jump, my hero walk, my hero idle, these are all the 3 animation states. Typically, we'd be able to preview them here, but there's no model to associate them right now, so it doesn't show us a preview here. We'll put a model in there later on where it can associate with us. Okay, here's another really important thing. Notice when I click on these clips themselves, you also have something called loop time. Loop time means it's going to loop forever, right? And in this particular case, for idle, you do want that. You want idle to loop. In our explosion last week, we didn't want it to loop, so we took that off. We checked it off because we only want to play our explosion one time. Right? Here we want idle to keep looping over and over again until I'm done, whenever I feel like it, right? Same thing with jumping. I want it to keep jumping as long as I'm in the air, right? So I don't want it to loop. And the same thing with walking. So that loop time's got to be on. Okay, so we've done these things. We prepared ourselves. Now there's one other thing we need. I need a mechanism for moving from one state to the other. And I'm going to use this integer. I'm going to make an integer variable inside the animator, and when it goes from 0 to 1, it means when I press my button to make it go, I can direct it to jump, or I can direct it to walk, right, by some kind of numeric value that we're going to use, okay? So I'm going to say that the idle state is the 0 state, right? I'm going to make walk 1, and hero jump is 2, okay? So 0, 1, and 2, that's what I'm going to do. And to do that, I need to make a parameter up here. I'm going to go plus. I'm going to make an integer. I'm going to call this anim state, just like we did last time. Anim state starts off at 0. And notice that the only way I'm going to go transition to hero walk is, if I look at the animator, I can create a condition for this transition where I change I say that if my anim state equals, right, as an example, to 1, right, I can move from hero idle to hero walk. And if my transition goes from 1 to 0, I'm going to move from hero walk, right, back down to idle, right? If I go from hero idle to hero jump, my animation state is going to equal to 2, because that's what I've decided. And from hero jump back down to here, my anim state is going to be equal to 0. Okay? And then from hero jump to hero walk, my anim state is going to be equal to 1. So making equal. And then from hero walk to hero jump, my anim state is going to be equal to 2. And this is the same exact kind of coding or situation we set up if we were doing it manually. So if I made a manual, like my own finite state machine, I could have done that, and I could switch animation states, but the animator does it all for us, right? So let's just check to see that we did it all correctly. So again, 0 to 2, right? 2 to 0. Remember, we have to make sure that it says equals, not greater than. From 2 to 1, 2 to 1. From 1 to 2. From 0 to 1, and from 1 to 0. Okay, so those are all the different states. Okay, we're going to save that scene. The value for walking is 1, right? So if I go from 0 to 1, it goes... Yeah, idle goes from 0 to 1, and then back from 1 to 0. The state here, the cycle offset you're talking about here, right? Is that what you're talking about? What are you looking at? 0. Oh no, this is the default state of my animation state. So animation state is variable. I'm just initializing it to 0. I'm making the variable default 0, so it's going to start off at idle. If I made the default state 1, it would start off at 1. So if I go here again, now it'll only show my idle state. It'll never go to the other states, because the only way I can go there is if I make it a 1 or a 2, right? And again, just to show you this, I'm just going to zoom in, so we can just zoom in on the actual object. You can see that this is my little hero, right? And he is just idling. Okay, cool. Now, what if I wanted to show you the other states just as a preview, not for normally? I want to be able to change my variable from 0 to 1. So when I go to 1, I should be walking. And let's just see that one now. So walking. Okay, that's pretty slow. See what I'm saying? That's a really slow walk. Okay, it actually looks like a run more than a walk, right? But that's the walk we have, the walk cycle. So that's really slow. I think that'd be really too slow on a game. So I want to speed that up. And again, I'm previewing my animations in order for me to do that. So I'm going to go back to my animator. And I'm going to go back to my hero walk, my clip, and notice that my speed is 1. Let's make it to 2 and see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm just changing my speed of the animation to 2, the clip speed. Right? Let's go on. And now that's pretty good. Right? Okay, so that's that. How about my my jumping animation? Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go back to my animator, and I'm going to move this from 1 to 2, and press play, and we'll see what my jumping animation looks like. So he's jumping. So as he jumps, and then you can see him how he's going to jump up in the air. Imagine he's in the air right now, and then he falls, and he's going to go to idle. Right? I think that's a pretty good speed. I don't think I want it to go too crazy. Right? And maybe that's not going to be right. We can't see it right now because we don't know how he's going to look when he's actually moving on a platform. Okay. All right, cool. So we've got our little animation set up, but how do we control when he does what? How do I do that? Right. So I want to press a button, and let's say, for example, I want to move my character with the WASD keys and the arrow keys. Let's say I need to set that up in code. Right, for me to do that. And now that we've set that up, let me just go back and change my default state to 0. That's what this is, right? I want you to also notice something else. I have something called a mirror, right? If I go to my hero walk and click mirror on, right? I'm just going to put it out there for you guys. Here's my mirror on, right? And if I go, let's go put this back to 1, all right? So we can check it out. What does mirror do? Nothing, right? Some people thought that when originally we looked at this, if I go back to my hero animator, that it would flip. But we got to set up that flip happening on our own. How do I flip my animation? So it goes from, it looks to the right. Right now he's looking to the right. And I want to make him look to the left. Do I have to make a whole new animation? Like take a whole new sprite sheet and make a whole new sprite sheet looking to the left. Then he's going to run left and make a whole new sprite sheet with all his runnings to the left. That's kind of a waste, right? I kind of have his right animation. He moves right. He runs right. He jumps right. I want to make him I want to do everything, all that same stuff, but I want to do it to the left, right? I want to mirror, right, or reflect the sprite sheet on the left when I hit the left button. And we can do that by scaling the hero, right? We can scale it across an axis, right? Remember, we have X and Y. So if I scale it across the Y axis, -1, right? Then what's going to happen is he's going to flip. He's going to appear to flip and look at the other way, right? So we don't have to redo all those animations again. In a 3D game, this is not possible, right? It's not possible because a 3D game uses, not really, it uses a lot of times an armature for this thing. There's bones that are inside the character that do this kind of stuff. Again, there's different ways of doing it, but that's, when we use bones, if we're not using clips like this, and we're using bones as an armature, then you can't just scale them, okay? All right, so here's our hero walk or hero jump, but how do we make this an animation? I have my hero, here he is right now, and I want to be able to, when I'm, just make this default 0, just in case I forget, I'll save him. Here's my hero, and I want to make him, when I press the buttons, I want him to move around, right? I only want to use the buttons with my keys. I don't want my mouse to move him around anymore, right? Because it doesn't make sense that my mouse moves the guy around, you know, in my scene. Now, there's a couple ways we can do this. I can use physics to push him, right? So when I move him around, he's being pushed by an impulse. I'm like giving him a blast of energy, and then he stops, right? Or as long as I'm pressing my buttons, he's moving, which is not physics-based, right? For now, all I want to just show is the animation state. I don't care about moving him. We'll do that another day, because today is presentation day for people who came in late, right?
I knew that.
Yeah, but I'm just doing this little movie right now, so that way it'll eat up some of our time, so we can actually do their presentations. All right. So yeah, so this is what we want. We want to program this, and again, what we want to do is we want to add a new script. So I'm going to go into my scripts folder. I'm going to add a new script, and we're going to call this player behavior. You can also call this. A lot of times people call this player controller. I'm just going to call this player behavior for now. All right, so there's my player behavior script. I'm going to, now, one thing to check is my preferences. I kind of talked about this. You can edit preferences. And in my preferences, you can choose the external tool. I'm using Visual Studio 2017. You can also use other tools like Visual Studio Code or some other editor that you want. You can also choose, there's other plugins for other editors if you don't want to use this. Also, I can also use the built-in Monodevelop, right? So whichever one I want. Today, I'm going to use Monodevelop, not Visual Studio. Right? So we used Visual Studio last time. So built-in Monodevelop is a different editor, right? And when I double-click on my player behavior, it's going to bring up my little Monobehaviour editor when I do that. Eventually. All right. It's still loading. It's taking its sweet time loading. Probably setting stuff up from the first time, because the first time I've used it on this machine. All right. So Monobehaviour is very similar to Visual Studio in that it gives you a little editor. I don't need the all-powerful Visual Studio to do this stuff. I can use little Monobehaviour or Monodevelop for that, right? Now here's my player behavior. And what I want to do is I want to be able to get a reference to my animator, right? Remember I talked about this last time. So I want to make kind of a reference. I want to say here's our public properties, if you will. We're not really properties, they're more like instance variables. We're going to use public. We'll use the public keyword. We'll say animator. And we'll call this the animator. Right? And I want to get a reference to this. And then what I want to do is I want to say something like this. On update, if my animator, right? And if you notice I want to set the my set integer. I want to set integer. Let me do that again. I'll start with the input. If I input dot get axis, and if I say get axis horizontal, my horizontal axis, on input, if it's greater than 0, right, which means if it's positive direction, I want it to change from my idle to my walk, right? I don't need that. There we go. All right, so that's what I want to do. So if my input.get axis horizontal, so this means if the right button is pressed, that's either I think it's D or right arrow. Right? By the way, you guys need this for next week if you don't know how to do this, right? For not next week, but the week after for your test, right? Then what I want to do is I want to change my anim state. So I want to say something like this. I want to say that animator then dot set integer, right? Anim state, that's what I called it, right? I want to change it to 1, right? That's what this means. So I'm saying, hey, get my integer that I defined in my animator. I remember I defined an integer called anim state. I want to change the value to 1, which makes it so it goes to the right. Okay? So that's true. Okay. And what if I input dot get key, right? What if I get key the key code? I do a key code dot space. Here's my space. If this is the truth, right? If this is what I get in there, then what I really want is for it to jump. So I want to say that, okay, cool. I want to say my animator dot set integer to which is called anim state, right? Just like I did last time, to 2. Okay? Those are the 2 states that I've defined right now in my update. Does this make sense to you guys? What I'm doing? I'm modifying the animator. I've defined a variable called anim state, right? I could have called it state, but state might be a reserved word, so I made it anim state, right? I want to move from 0 to 1, and from 1, or from any other state, from 0 to 2, okay? But what happens? How do I get back to 0? Right? I'll show you what I mean by this. So first of all, let's attach this player script. So I'll save. I'm going to go back to Unity. Right? Here's my Unity, and here's my player behavior. Right? And here's my hero, but there's no script attached. I can drag and drop it though. So I want to kind of drag and drop a script in there. So there's my player behavior. I've got my animator. Here it is right here. Right? And what I want to do is in my animations folder, I can grab my hero animator and drag and drop it in. So I want to kind of make this the animator. This is what I want to kind of put it. But what the problem that I have is my animator doesn't like this kind of stuff, right? When I grab my animator and put it in here. How come? We kind of talked about this last week. I could try to do this too as well. I could try and grab my hero, right, and put it in here. And this seems to work. Well, the reason why this works is because hero animator is a detached component, right? And what this really does, animator, it looks for a game object that has the animator on it, and a game object that has an animator, which is the hero. So the hero itself is the one that I'm dragging in. It's almost like I'm dragging a copy of itself onto this. Another way to do that is to look at the hero and get component. I can use the get component script to look at the hero, all the components that are inside the hero, and get the first animator component that I find, right? And that script looks like this. Instead of this, right, making it public, I could do something like this. I could say animator is equal to get components, right, animator, right? And what this does is it gets the first component that I find in my hero, and this way I can make this thing private instead of public, right? Because I don't have to drag and drop. It'll just find the first component for me, right? So there's two ways to do it. I can drag and drop, or I can do it programmatically this way, make a reference to the component. I personally prefer the second way, right? Which means I can make this private. Okay. And a lot of times this is easier, right? You can do that too. There's many ways to do it, but I'm saying this is probably the easiest way, right? So I'm getting a component from my own object. Notice it'll go away now, right? Because it's not public anymore, right? All right, well, let's check this out. So I run. I should be able to see my little hero. When I press my right button, oh, man, it's still running to the right. And if I press my spacebar button, it kind of goes to this state. But how do I get back? I have to detect that nothing's being done, right? So that if my input is 0, right? If my horizontal axis input is 0, right? Or less than a certain threshold. It may not be 0, right? But something that's, you know, that's not quite 1, right? Then it should stop. It should just be idle again, okay? And I got to test this every frame, right? Because in my script, if I go back to my script, it says, hey, what if my horizontal axis is greater than 0? Well, then I want to do, you know, what it's going to be, right? What about if it's not? So for now, I'm going to say that it's else. Else, if it's not greater than 0, this is going to present a problem for us in a second. My animator.setInteger, right, anim state should be equal to 0. Okay, what this does is it changes my animation state from 1 to 0. Okay. Now let's go back and run it again. Okay, so I'm idle in a second. I run, I let go. Oh man, how come it didn't go back to 0? How come it didn't work? Well, it says if my input get axis is greater than 0, right? And when it came back around, it came back for the update, right? Somehow I didn't get to this, right? I didn't pull my input get axis because this didn't work, right? It should have gone here, but it didn't. Okay? So that didn't work for me. So what about if I said else if, putting it out there like this, I told you it's going to present a problem, right? What if we say it's equal to 0? Well, that solves our problems, right? So if it's equal to 0, then I want to make it 0, right? Else if. I'm just going to put this out there to you because I'm getting the axis twice, right? I'm getting input. I'm calling this function twice, every frame, right, to check. If I go here, if it's not true, I go here, I check it again, and I keep pulling the axis every single time. And plus, I'm pulling the key code space, right? All right, cool. We're idling in a second. And then I press right, and then I don't, and I'm still idling. Press space, I do that, and I'm still idling. Why is that true? Why is that happening, right? Well, the thing to note is what I'm getting with this input get axis horizontal. What am I getting here, right? So to do that, let's just for the most part, and I'll stop this after this. Once we get our motion going, this will be the end of my video this week. So it's going to be a longer video. Sorry. I'll do a debug .log, and I'll pump out what it's going to be for my input get axis. So if I'll try this out, so I'll say that instead of polling every single time, right, like this, what I want to do is pull once, right? So I'm going to kind of make a variable, right? Make a variable. I'm going to use the var keyword because I don't know what kind it's going to be, right? And I want to grab this input get axis stuff out of here, and I'll call it input, and I'll make it equal to this, right? There's my input. But it only does it once. It doesn't do it every single time, like 5 times, right? And then when I'm say if input here, I'll just change this to input, right? If my input's greater than 0, it'll do that. My input's greater than equal to 0 or equal exactly to 0. It'll be that. Now, equaling to 0 doesn't mean it's not accurate, right? Here's my input. debug.log, and I'll put out input. I'm going to do one of these. I'll say input, right, plus input, right, and see what it does. I want to see what my input is every frame. Okay. Get this for now. My input get key, I don't care about that right now. Just this. Okay, let's try it out and see what happens. So, well, run it. And let's take a look at that. So right now the input's 0. Okay, notice it's right there, right? And I press my right button. Okay, notice what happened, right? If I press my left button, something else happened, right? And then it goes to 0. So it does go to 0, my input. Here's my space. My input's still 0, right? All right. What's going on? How come I can't set back the way what I'm doing, right? Yeah, let's go back to see what's happening here. So here's my Anima state, right? This is what happened. I saw this earlier, but I wanted to see if you guys saw it. Anima state. I've named my variable incorrectly, right? And that's what's causing my debug to happen. It's doing what I'm supposed to do, but it's supposed to be anim state. Right, and I put this else if. Let's just put this else in there for a second. Right, so if it's else something else, it'll stop. Let's see if that works now. Oh, okay, idle, run, let my hand go, idle, run, let my hand go, idle. Took a bit of time to get there though, didn't it? Watch. I let go, took a second, almost like a bit of a second, almost like it had to finish what it was doing. I'm like that, right? What that is, my friends, is a transition from one to the other. Remember that the blend in my anim state? In my animator, I'm blending between one animation type and another. I've got an animation sequence, and I'm blending between one set of frames and another set of frames, right? That blend time is what I'm experiencing right here. I want the blend time to be almost 0, right? Okay, let's go back. What about if I press space? I jump, and I come back. This is not bad, right? Look. Space, right? If I press space enough times, right, it'll space, and then as long as I'm pressing space, it's happening, right? Okay, but that's not what I want, right? Because when I'm jumping, I want to keep jumping until I land on the ground. This is a great test for space, right? But it's not what I want. What about if I go from, I want to run and I want to press space? Can I do that? And this is what you have to kind of do. You kind of have to test your animations to see what it looks like. So space, run, and it took a little longer to finish. Again, it takes a bit of time to kind of transition. So I know what to do with my animator now. I'll go back to my animator. And you can see that when I walk, to go to walk, it happens almost immediately. And take a look at this now. I got this little animation here going on, right? So it's interesting because it allows me to see if I can move it around for you. Here's my hero example, right? So it allows me to see what the actual animation looks like. This is the idle animation. Then it goes to walk. This is the actual transition. It's not bad. It's pretty small, actually. And I can actually make it smaller, right? So it's not as bad, right? Again, I'm just going to use this little animation. And then from there, it's going to transition. And that's what I wanted to do. As soon as I press my button, I want to go to that state. Well, the same thing goes with on the way back. Look at this transition. It's a little bigger. And luckily, there's no exit time, right? But I want to make it so that it's as small as possible, right? So again, I'm from my walking state to my idle state. That's what I want, right? So immediately. So it's a preview of what's going to happen. Okay, I've adjusted this. I'm going to save it, and then let's run it again. Let's see if it's a little better than it was before. So I'm walking. That's still not quite there. Why is that? Take a look at this number down here. Look at this number. Look on the console what's going on, right? So that's the other thing that we're doing. We're saying if it's something else, right? If it's anything else other than greater than 0, that might not be what we want, right? There's some extra numbers here. When I press my my button, right? When I press my D key, it pulls. It's a number that accelerates to 1, right? Maybe I want a threshold where it's not just greater than 0. Maybe it has to be greater than 1 or greater than 0.1, right? to give myself an error threshold, right? So that will speed it up as well. And that's in my code. So I'm going to go back to my code. It's in my Monodevelop. And I'm saying anything greater than 0. But that may not be the case. Maybe I want to make it so that it's greater than 0.1, right? And what I mean by this is that it goes from 0 to 1, and there might be a threshold of numbers that are just small enough that it keeps on. It's not 0. It's greater than 0, which means this animation state keeps playing. All right, let's see how that works. Press play. Key not found exception. What did I do? Key not found exception. What did I do? Greater than simple 1 point. Okay, well maybe we'll make it so that the input. First of all, what variable type is this? I'm getting a single. It's a floating point type. I was right. I was right. I knew it was a float type, because if I replace this with float, then that's what the thing is, right? That's what the actual type is. So this should be greater than 0.1 f, if I'm not wrong. Let's try that again. That was a weird error that I got. Okay, cool. So now if I run, look down here in the input. It's hard to see, but my input is like, it drops down below 0.5 almost. So I want to get, maybe it's below 0.5. And again, this is the testing we're doing. So instead of 0.1, we're going to say if it's greater than 0.5, there's a negative here, a negative around this, right? I'll show you other ways to do this as well. Go back to Unity. Okay, well, let's try this out again. So I press the button, right? Took a bit to get going now, which is a negative, right? But it immediately stops. As soon as I let go, it pretty much stops right away. There's a bit of a delay though, right? And if I press the other button, like A, I get a negative value, right? This is the key that I'm going to get when I want to go the other way, right? Take a look at this. This takes a little bit of time to get going and a little bit of time to stop. Now, why would I want to use the horizontal axis controls? That means if I plug in a Xbox controller, right, then it'll respond to my controls just like it would my keys. And I'm going to do that right now. I have a little Xbox controller that I brought today, right? And I'm going to connect to it. Actually, I'll do that maybe on the break. What I have to do to connect an Xbox controller, for those people who don't know, anyone not know how to connect an Xbox controller to a PC? You don't use the Xbox controller? Okay. Well, to do that, right, you got to have an Xbox controller, but you got to go into Bluetooth settings. Here's my Bluetooth settings and devices, right? Notice that, it already has a gaming mouse. That's what it's detecting. But I want to add another Bluetooth device. So I'm going to kind of click on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on to find my Xbox controller, right? So I'm going to kind of click on there, right? So that it's kind of looking at my input from my Xbox wireless controller. Now, it kind of detected it already. And I'm going to use this thing to connect. That shouldn't be the case. I'm seeing other things. I'm seeing a BlackBerry. Is there a BlackBerry in the class? A bunch of other stuff, but not the one I know. There's an unknown device too. Let's go. And there's a laptop. I got some laptops that I'm detecting, but not that one. Let's try this again. So there's also everything else, which is Xbox controllers. And sometimes what this works, it works nicely as well. And if I can't do this, I'll just use my keys. But the first thing to do is connect your Xbox controller to your device, right? I know, but when I did it, it asked me for my key code, and that's not cool. So let's try that again. Or to input. What was that?
Sometimes it does that, and then it's just like the default.
000? Huh? I don't think I should put. I shouldn't have to do that. By the way, that shouldn't be required. I didn't have to do the pin. You can Google it, but I'm pretty sure that that's not. This is not correct. Try connecting your device again. Yeah. 1111. I don't think so. I think it. I don't. Can you, someone look it up? There's probably a thing to do that. What was that? There's probably just a trick to getting this done. I did it earlier, but I had connected it during Gamescom to another person's device, and that's why it's. My take on it. Put more zeros in there. I don't know. Well, the way to do it obviously is to go and check out the. We'll just Google it for a second before we go on. So pull up our little library of the ages, right? We'll say Windows 10. Okay, right, connecting Xbox controller to Windows 10. Asks for pin. What does it say?
I haven't seen anything.
One Xbox controller, pin, Windows 10, added device. USB. Okay, I may have a USB connection for this thing. I may. I don't think so. No. That's definitely not the case. My Bluetooth connection is not. What was that? Android? Yeah, it's a little one, yeah. It's a little Bluetooth, the mini Bluetooth cable connections. I also have another Xbox controller I can use. I just wanted to use wireless because I want to show you guys wireless. I have another one. I have another one here too. Worst case scenario, I'll use that one. But I normally have cables. I don't think I have my cable here today for my charger. Do you have it? Anyone have a Bluetooth wired? You know what? I'm recording. No time. So I will use instead my old school controller, which I have. Yeah, I always bring more than one device. This one here actually has a little dongle like this, right? You guys can't see it, but it looks like this. And it actually, the guys who are watching remotely, I know it's terrible, but the great thing is it allows me to do one of these, which plugs in, and I'm gonna find my battery now, which is somewhere at the bottom of my bag. And this should be able to do it with my Xbox controller. It's important because we're making games. We probably should have a controller to do that as opposed to keys. Yeah, my little charger's not here today, which is too bad. All right, so battery. I know, it's old school. And then it'll plug in nicely. I'll plug this into this. And then I'll connect this to my USB. For people who aren't seeing what I'm doing, I'm actually connecting my controller physically to USB port. Do I have a USB port there? What was that? Yeah, it's live. It's always when we're live, when we're doing this stuff that's interesting. I'm out of USBs. I only have 2 USB ports. Wow, that's really sucky. Well, I'm gonna have to unplug my mouse for a second. While I do this, let's use so unplug this in. And plug it in. Oh God, it's so tight. This thing. There we go. Killing my thing. All right, I got that plugged in. I think I need two USBs on this thing. We'll turn it on. Which should give me the ability to plug in wired onto this thing. I don't have this, but I should be able to now move this thing around with my controller in a second, as opposed to what I did before. All right, so let's just stop this thing. Now, the great thing is Unity should detect my controller inputs automatically because it's just left and right input, right, from my actual controller. Now, the thing with this thing is, if I'm not wrong, is I think I need to use my other dongle first. I'm going to cause a ruckus here with these dongles today. And I'll do one of these. Yes, and now I can do it. Yes, I can do this, right? Now, the one thing I can't do with the button, notice this is the button that I'm using right now, right? It's pretty good. The response is pretty good from my Xbox controller, right? Much better than my keys. And that 0.5 setting is not hurting me, right? It's not like it's doing when it goes to less than 0.5. It's actually a bit more responsive than the keyboard, right? So it works okay. That's what I wanted to show you. All that worked, right? I know. But so that's a good thing. So my Xbox controller works pretty darn good. One thing to note is I haven't really set up my controller to work on the opposite direction, right? And that's why I wanted to use horizontal state. Now, typically what we want to do is this. I want my key code, right? I want my key code to be space when I jump, or I want it to be the default fire button, right? And to understand what those key codes are, right? I'm just going to go into back to Unity for a second. All right, so here's Unity. And I also have in Unity, at the top of my files here, I have a bunch of other settings. One of the things I have is, that's not what I wanted. I'm just going to unplug my controller for a second, put my mouse back in. Because the controller is a real annoying. I mean, my keypad is really annoying on this particular laptop I'm using. I wanted to show you this. So in here, let me just go back to this for a second. If I go to my edit, and if I go to my project settings, there's something called input. Here's my input. And notice here are my axes, right? I have right now my horizontal axis. You can define whatever buttons you want. Right now, my horizontal axis is A and D. The negative button is A, and the positive button is D. And it gives you some basic settings here, right? Okay, cool. There's also Fire 1. Fire 1 is the A button, okay? It says mouse 0, that's the left mouse button, left control, or Fire 1, okay? So how do I normally jump in a game? What's the default value when I'm jumping? A, I could fire with that too sometimes, all right? So what else could I use for jumping? I could use the B button. Well, space I'm using, but what about on a controller? I got a controller. Which button am I going to use? Which button scheme am I going to use? Winston, what's the default button scheme for jumping on a controller besides A? Could use Y, right? Y is pretty much the other one. Right? A for firing, Y for jumping, right? Kind of thing, right? All right, well, Fire 1 is this one, right? It says control, the control button, and that's on the controller. It says key axis is the X-axis, right? That's what it does. And then get mouse button. There's Fire 2, and there's also jump. This is interesting. There's a jump button too. Look. Instead of using jump, as in like the space bar, there's actually an axis called jump. And I'd rather use this one because that means it'll work on my controller as well. So let's change that. So if I go back to this, and instead of my input.keycode space, the space bar, I want to use input.getAxis. Input.getAxis. Jump. And if I did that, that's a better solution. And I want to make sure that the jump axis, again, is greater than 0.5 F, just to give myself a bit of a threshold, right? And to check this, if I go back and just use my regular, without my joystick, so save this, go back to Unity, because we're talking about input too today. And if I run this thing, right, and if I press my space bar when I'm idling, I press my space bar works okay, right? And now I'm gonna unplug this and go back into my controller setup, which is dongles. I know. Sorry. It's instant, right? Well, as soon as I plug in this thing, right, I'm good to go. I can run, right? And then I can jump. And jump is my Y by default. So jump, I jump with my Y. Now, again, it's not set up properly because it doesn't detect that I'm grounded. So it'll just jump when I press the button. But the button works pretty good, right? I can walk, right? Those two things are pretty good. Jump, walk, right? I can do that together, right? I can walk and then jump, right? They'll take the place of that. Those are good things on the controller. So that's why we use get access as opposed to numbers or buttons typically, unless we're doing something else. Like I want to look at a menu and I'm doing something else. Otherwise, or you can set up your own input for your Xbox as well, right? Instead of using the built-in axes, you can get your own input. All right, cool. So we did this piece, but now we want to reverse them, and then we're going to be done for the day for my video. All right, yeah, I swear, right? I know it's a long video, but let's take a look at this. All right, so we did. I'm just going to unplug this and put back my mouse for a second. There we go. All right, so yeah, more. You can do that. For example, if you look at my control states, right? This is my axis, right? For one of my controllers, right? And notice that there's a second set of axes for another controller, right? What you can do is you can decide which type you want. You can decide which controller. So I was going to show you this today too. Which controller you're using, and there's actually some really cool plugins to use, right? So that way you can download. There's other plugins you can download that are free that can differentiate between. You can have up to 8 controllers at the same time, no problem. Okay. All right, so we need a little bit of code now. I want to reverse this direction. So what if my input.getAxis, right, as an example, and by the way, I don't want to do this either every frame, right? I want to check this. I want to have one floating point for my input, for my kind of movement, right? So I'm going to rename this. So refactor rename to move, right? And I want to refactor rename. I want to kind of make another one called jump, right? I want to make that equal to this. This is a far better way than doing it the other way, by the way. Okay, so here's my jump, and here's my move, and then put this as jump. So it's more kind of descriptive, my variables, as opposed to like input, right? I don't need this anymore. But what I want to do is this. When I move left, I want to flip them, right? I want to flip the animation one way or the other, right? And what I want to do is I want to make sure that it kind of keeps track of his state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another private variable called facing right. So is facing right. So it's a Boolean variable that I'm going to use. It's going to be private. I'm going to call this Boolean variable is facing right. And I'm going to send it to true. Okay. So just to show you this as a trick too, right? So what if my move is greater than 0.5, right? Well, then I want to change my animation state, but I also want to make it so that my is facing right is equal to true, right? Because I'm facing right, right? What about though if my move? I'm gonna put if my move. I'm gonna put that in here, right? And we'll make it so that's an else if. What if my move is less than? That's a weird thing that happened, right? There we go. What if my move is less than 0.5? That means that like I'm going the other way, right? I'd still want to go to 1, right? I want to say facing right is equal to false, right? So this is kind of the thing that I want to do, right? So if it's true, I want to kind of keep track of my facing here. I kind of say I'm facing right. Here I'm not facing right. Okay, I'm facing left. And then what I could do is I can check for this, right? Every frame I can check to see what my facing is. If my facing is true, then I want my scale to be on the right, right? If my facing is false, I want to set my scale to the left. Let's do that the first time. So I'm going to say something like this. If is facing right, if not is facing right, not facing right, then what I want to do is I want to change my scale. So game object dot set. I want to set my scale dot transform dot set. I think it's local scale, right? I want to make it a new vector object, a new vector 3 object. Make it a vector 3, where I want to kind of define my vectors as, so 0 is the x or across the x-axis. I don't want to flip that way. And y is the x-axis, so the y-axis is where I want to flip. So I want to kind of say that this is 0, but my y is negative 1f, and my z is 0. So I don't want to change that. Actually, it should be not 0, it should be 1. 0 means flat. It won't even show up, right? There we go. So that's what it is if it's facing right. If it's not facing right. And let's check this condition if I can make it so it flips. I'm only flipping it on the other axis. These other things don't matter, right? Okay, so let's see if this works. So I'm going to make it go. For now, I'm not going to use my Xbox controller. I'm just going to use my keys to test. Oh, man. Is that what I wanted? Like, kind of makes it. So like if I kind of do this, this is cool. He's also running all the time. Like I didn't even make him run. He's running, right? So what happened? How come this this whole thing is messed up, right? So this is, I did X and Y, and it kind of did something different than I expected, right? It also made me run from the very beginning, which is kind of weird too, right? So that's really weird, right? Kind of my animation state went to 1 automatically, right? And my jumping, I didn't do my jumping or anything like that. But this is kind of weird, right? Game object transform, local scale. So maybe should I make it so that this isn't -1? Should it be -1 on the x-axis? Right? That's weird. Let's take a look at that. Well, I run this. Why am I running? That's the question. Why shouldn't I just be idling? This is correct. The x-axis is correct. But why, if I go back to this and I just do one of these, right? If I just comment this stuff out. So question for you guys, why now am I running all the time? I'm running right away, going right from one to the other. How come? Anybody have an idea? We have to be careful what we've asked. We've said if move is greater than 0.5, right? And I said if move is less than 0.5, should it be less than negative 0.5? This is our issue, right? It's on the left-hand side, right? Positive move goes positive 0. Negative move or left move goes negative 0. So this is the bug. Done. Now let's put that jumping back, or this is facing stuff right, correct, right? This is if not is facing right. If not is facing right, right? But we said that facing right is true, right? So why is this triggering? If not is facing right. Well, let's see if this is true. It's facing right is true. This is it's facing right is false. That was the bug that caused it to happen, right? So this should fix the problem. So now it should be I'm facing right, I'm idling, I move, I let go, I move left, I let go, I jump, right? As long as I'm moving, but oh man, I can't go back the other way, right? And so is facing right, then do this, right? Else, if facing left, do the other way. Uh-oh. This is an if else. That's why I put it down here so you can see. Else, I want to do it the other way, right? Okay, but this is like I'm duplicating code here, right? Would it work? Yeah. Right, that's why I set this up for you guys to see this. So now I'm facing left, right, automatically. What the heck? I shouldn't be facing left. And I'm always facing left. No, this is if is this, and this is this. There's my -1. So that's cool. Okay, let's try this out again, right? So left, right? I want to kind of move the other way. I should be able to click the button like one time and it should just move. But the reason why this isn't happening is because I've made it 0.5. There's not enough energy for me to, I have to actually move them left. But if I flick them to the left, if I just press the button really quickly, it doesn't flip them one way or the other. I have to press more, like a little bit longer. So 0.5 may not be the right threshold for me, right? So maybe we'll make this 0.3. Bear with me while I do this because this is what we have to do when we create our controls. Again, not this week, but the other week. This is much better now, right? I see this just works a lot better. I can move back and forth, right? And this is with this. I can jump, right? I can go the other way. This is with my keyboard. Okay, cool. So this works okay, but this is kind of a long piece of code, and I want to probably do it a different way, right? So the other different way to do it, is there anyone else has a different way of doing this in one line? Anyone think about a way? Ah, there you go, ternary operator. That's what I was looking for, if everyone knew how to do this. So what I mean is, I can still put this line in here, right? So I can still do this. I'm going to show you what I do to build it up, and I can give it a condition, right? So I can say, well, if it's not facing right, if this is true, right, that's not facing right, then I want to set my a new vector of this, right? So I want to make this the answer, right? However, if that's false, I want to make a vector of this type. And it's hard to see this, so I'm just going to kind of show you this way, right? So what is this line? What does it do? Why can I do it in one line? What's the ternary operator, right? So it says, hey, set local scale to something. But first check a condition. If this condition is true, then anything after the question mark is what I'm going to set local scale to. However, if it's false, that condition, set this local scale to this. And this does it all in one nice line. And we don't need all this code. By the way, you can also express this question mark, if I'm not wrong, on different lines. So you can see it all like this. This is okay too, because it's just white space for the compiler. And now we should be able to make this work the way we want. So one run to the right, run to the left, jump to the left, turn and jump to the right. And now let's try it on the controller. Wait while I plug it in. And this is low tech, right? But it works. Okay, so I go to the right, I go to the left, right? I jump, go to the right and jump, and I can turn pretty much and pretty quickly to the right and left with my controller, which is what I want to do, right? And that's the lesson, my friends, right? So in this lesson, what we talked about was how to set up a proper animation, right? Just switch back to my trusty mouse. So in this lesson, we learned how to notice I also detected that I plugged in my joystick. This is kind of cool. An old 360 wireless receiver for Windows. All right. So we did that, and we did that by doing in the hero animator. We created a hero animator, this thing here, where basically we created this finite state machine to move us from a hero idle animation to hero walk and hero jump. We created all these links. That's what we kind of did. Before that, of course, we actually created our sprite sheets, and we used this codeinweb.com input, this plugin, so that our texture packer would work with our sprites. Of course we included our sprites and our sounds, which we haven't talked to, inside of our tiles inside of our sprites folder. We're going to use this project again when we continue with our platformer. For now, I just want to show you animation if you want to do it for your game, right? Your 2D game, right? We had our sprite sheet. We created our hero, and from there, when we created our hero object, we're ready now. Other than our collider, we haven't figured out a collider from it, or we did talk about it, right? We can use this hero right now pretty much as a prefab for our hero object, okay, if you really wanted to. So we did all that stuff. Then we talked about how to wire him up. So finally, we went into our code. We created our this little player behavior code. And what this does, this line here detects the animator component on the game object, right? We had to create a variable for that. And then depending on the input of our animator, and we got that, of course, we used the get access, talked about access as well. We set the state of our animator, which we defined back in Unity, right? Here we created a variable anim state, right? And this anim state variable is the thing that determines how we traverse our finite state machine from one state to the other, right? That's what we did here. And then depending on how we're polling this, we'll change states. And then we talked about how to change the facing. Now, we did this all in the update function, my friends. And to be honest with you, it's bad. When we come back to this in a future date, we'll change the update function so it has a hero move function, and a hero flip function, right? So it flips the hero from one place to the other, because we may need to do this somewhere else other than update. And we may need to call this kind of idea multiple times. And we'll see that later on, because that's one of the things we did. This same pattern is the pattern we're going to use for making our enemies. Our enemies are also going to have an animator state, right? They're going to have an idle state. They're going to have a move state. They're going to have a jump state. They're going to have all these things. And we're going to create a little bit of AI for the enemies where they can see the hero. As soon as they see the hero, they run at him. Okay? So we're going to do that in a future video. But for now, we've got some basis for what we're doing in terms of our animation states. Next week, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, and again, I'm not going to be here next week physically, so people who missed earlier today, Saturday next week, just to reiterate, I will physically not be here. I have a conflict, but I will be producing the videos on Friday, right? So you don't have to physically be here on Saturday. You can meet with your team and work on your stuff, because the next build is going to be due in a couple weeks, right? Not next week, but the week after. We're going to do a test in class, right? So that'll be Saturday, the 16th of December, right? Where we use the same stuff I just talked about today and all the other things we've talked about up until today to create a little game, okay? Okay, so this is the stuff we're talking about here today. One thing we haven't done is we haven't put everything up on GitHub. I'm just going to save and quit. And I'm going to file, save scene, and file, save project. I'm going to close off Unity right now. And again, and I'm going to also close this off. I'm just going to file save the project. And I close this off as well. And inside I have this folder called COMP305 F2017 platform demo. I'm going to put this up on GitHub, and I'm going to do that the hard way because it doesn't have integrated GitHub controls. So I'm going to say CD to my desktop, and I'm going to go CD to this particular file. I'm in here. I'm going to do git init to initialize my Git repository, right? Git add dot to add up all my files. We didn't actually. The other thing we didn't do, we didn't put it up on a build. But we're not. This wasn't a platformer build. This was an animator demo, so we didn't have a chance to do that. I'm going to say git commit -m. And we'll say that we'll call this initial commit because that's what we're doing. It's kind of our initial state of our project with a hero in it, right? It's going to flag all the files as the things that I'm committing. Meanwhile, while it's doing that, I'll go up on GitHub, right? in my Centennial College, and I'll add a new project called COMP305 Fall 2017. It'll be platformer demo, which I haven't really fully done yet. This is the first part. As you can see, there's lots of stuff to do in the platformer demo, right? And I'm breaking it up into pieces. I'm copying that, going back to here, right? Actually, I can copy these last 2 lines. Go back to here and paste. And then I'll put it up on GitHub that way. So you guys should have this up now. If you want to take a look at this project, I'm putting it up for a couple reasons. A, it kind of talks about how to use controls to kind of go between one state and another from an animation perspective. And so you can use this project during your tests, right, as a reference, right? You can do that, yes. You'll have access to everything. You'll have access to everything, right? But I'm giving you a place to look. That's all I'm doing. So instead of you searching all the internet to figure out how to do stuff in your test, I'm going to give you some resources to look at, and one of them is our GitHub repository up on Centennial College, right? Or which is github.com/Centennial College. All right, so I've done all that today. Other than that, that's it for me. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then for the next hour and a half, we're going to go and do your presentations. Okay, so we have about an hour and a half until we're done class. So I want to see your presentation. Again, what I'm looking for, and again, for people who are not here for whatever reason, right? There's other people who are not here. They're going to present we're presenting our games today, right? And again, I'm looking for a few slides to kind of talk about your game. A very simple thing, right? Here's my game. Remember, here's my team. Remember, right? These kind of things. It's been a long time. And then here's a demo of my game. This is how it works. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing today after the break. Okay, otherwise, I'll put up another video next week. And that's it for me.